In 1993, the storm of the century buried the town of Oak Ridge under 10 feet of ice. It was a weather event that shouldn't have been possible, a superstorm that stretched from Canada to Central America. While the wealthy neighbors in their 3-story mansions were shivering, watching their pipes freeze and their roofs collapse under the weight of the snow, one man was perfectly warm. He wasn't in a mansion. He wasn't even in a house. He was living inside a massive industrial concrete pipe that the entire town had mocked for years. They called him Pipe Man. They called him a lunatic. They even tried to have him evicted for being an eyesore. But as the temperature dropped to 40 below zero and the power grid flickered and died, the town's biggest joke became its only survivor. This isn't just a story about a storm. It's a story about a man who saw the end of the world coming and built a masterpiece in the one place nobody thought to look.
Arthur Miller wasn't always a hermit. In the late 80s, he was one of the lead civil engineers for the state's massive sewage and drainage project. He was a man who understood two things better than anyone: thermal mass and structural integrity. But after a personal tragedy and a growing obsession with the vulnerability of the modern electrical grid, Arthur quit his job. He sold his suburban home, gave away most of his belongings, and bought a worthless strip of land on the edge of town, a rocky, sloped lot that was considered unbuildable. Then came the delivery. The townspeople watched in confusion as a heavy-duty flatbed truck arrived, carrying a massive 12-foot diameter reinforced concrete culvert pipe. It was the kind of pipe used for massive city water mains. It was 30 feet long and weighed several tons. Using a rented crane, Arthur had the pipe lowered into a deep trench he had spent months digging into the side of the hill. The mockery started immediately. The neighbors in the Ridge View estate overlooking Arthur's land would stand on their balconies with binoculars. "Look at him," they'd laugh. "He's living like a hamster. All that engineering knowledge, and he's moved into a drain pipe." Arthur didn't care. While they were painting their shutters and mowing their lawns, Arthur was welding a heavy steel door onto the front of his pipe and installing a tiny, high-efficiency wood stove. He spent his days hauling thousands of pounds of flat river stones into the pipe, lining the floor and the lower half of the walls. To the neighbors, he was a crazy man living in trash. To Arthur, he was building a thermal battery.
What the town didn't see was what was happening underneath and around the pipe. Arthur knew that the earth itself is the best insulator. By burying the pipe 6 feet deep into the hillside, he was utilizing the earth's constant temperature of roughly 55 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 degrees Celsius. But Arthur went further. He created a double-shell ventilation system. He ran smaller PVC pipes deep into the ground, a primitive but genius geothermal air intake. This meant that even if it was negative 30 degrees outside, the air entering his pipe would be warmed by the earth before it ever reached his lungs. Inside, the pipe was surprisingly modern. He had used his engineering background to create a ship cabin layout. The back third, a raised sleeping platform with thick wool blankets and a library of books. The middle, a small kitchen area with a gravity-fed water system from a hidden insulated tank. The front, his command center with a small desk and his wood stove. The town council tried to sue him. They called his home a non-permitted structure. They sent inspectors,
But Arthur had studied the law. Because his home was technically movable infrastructure and wasn't a permanent building on a foundation, he stayed in a legal gray area. By late 1992, Arthur had become a local ghost story. Parents told the kids to stay away from the pipe man. The mockery reached its peak during the Christmas parade, when a local float even featured a cardboard pipe with a man dressed in rags. Arthur just watched from his hillside, checked his barometer, and began stockpiling dry oak. He knew the cycle of the mountains. He knew the great silence was coming.
On March 12, 1993, the sky over Oak Ridge didn't turn gray. It turned a bruised, sickly purple. The storm of the century hit with the force of a hurricane, but instead of rain, it brought ice. In the first 6 hours, 2 feet of snow fell. Then the wind started. 70-mile-per-hour gusts whipped the snow into a frenzy, creating whiteout conditions so severe that people were getting lost in their own driveways. By midnight, the power grid for the entire county failed. In the Ridgeview mansions, the horror began. These homes were built for looks, not for survival. They had massive glass windows that leaked heat and high ceilings that trapped the warmth where no one could reach it. When the electric furnaces died, the temperature inside the million-dollar homes plummeted. Pipes began to burst inside the walls, flooding the houses with freezing water that turned to ice within minutes. Families huddled together under every blanket they owned, but it wasn't enough. The mansions had become giant refrigerators. It took 3 days for the National Guard to reach Oak Ridge. They found a town in ruins. Roofs had caved in under the weight of the snow. Dozens of people were treated for severe hypothermia. When the rescue teams finally reached the hillside, they saw a strange sight. A thin plume of smoke was rising directly out of a massive snowbank. They began to dig, thinking they were recovering a body. Instead, they hit a steel door. It swung open, and out stepped Arthur Miller, looking well-rested and perfectly warm. The neighbors who had laughed at him, the ones who had mocked him for living like a hamster, were standing nearby, wrapped in emergency foil blankets, their multi-million-dollar homes ruined behind them. No one laughed that day. One by one, the neighbors approached Arthur, asking if they could just sit inside his pipe for a few minutes to feel the warmth of the stones. Arthur, being a man of character, didn't say, "I told you so." He simply opened his door and boiled more water for tea. Arthur lived in that pipe for another 20 years. Today, it's still there, though mostly covered by forest. It stands as a silent monument to a simple truth. Intelligence isn't about how much you spend. It's about how well you understand the world around you. Arthur's story reminds us that the crowd isn't always right. Sometimes the person everyone is laughing at is the only one who truly sees what's coming. If you found this story of survival and vindication inspiring, make sure to hit the like button. It helps us tell more stories of the incredible people history tried to forget. And I want to hear from you in the comments. If you were facing the storm of the century, would you rather be in a glass mansion or Arthur's concrete pipe?
Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world's most incredible hidden stories. Until next time, stay prepared.